Well, hello everyone. My name is Kate Windsor. Welcome to our October event. I'd like to start out tonight by doing a land acknowledgement. We are meeting on the traditional homelands of the Anishinaabe people who continue to live in the area and exercise treaty rights on this land and surrounding waters. So we humbly work to honor this living history. We are Northeast Metro Climate Action, also known as NEMCA. We're a local group of friends, neighbors, like-minded people who believe in a healthier, cleaner, and sustainable future. We're all volunteers. Our mission is to broaden awareness of the reality and implications of the changing climate to our neighbors, community, and elected officials. So we are actively involved in local and state elections to identify and support climate champions. So please take a look at our Facebook page and consider voting for the candidates that we endorse. They're pinned to the top of the page. So for more information about NEMCA, you can visit our website and our Facebook page. It's Northeast Metro Climate Action.org for our website, and just Google our name for the Facebook page. So we do have some co-hosts tonight. We have West Metro Climate Action, Resilient Roseville, Indivisible North Metro, St. Croix Valley Indivisible, Vote Climate, and Vadnais Heights Green Team. So thanks to all our co-hosts. Please go ahead and mute your microphones during the presentation, and you can put your questions in the chat or save them for later and raise your hand and we'll unmute you so you can ask your question in person. So tonight's speaker is one of our own, Dr. Steve Jorison. Steve is an adjunct professor of chemistry at the University of St. Thomas, and he teaches the science of climate change and clean energy in his courses. Steve is co-leader of Northeast Metro Climate Action. He serves on the Vadnais Heights Planning Commission and Green Team, and he also serves on the board of Resilient Cities and Communities. And so tonight, Steve is going to talk about the specific parts of Project 2025 that spell out how a Republican win in the White House and the Senate would be a disaster for Earth's livable environment, and how the plan would roll back the progress that we've made so far in transitioning to a clean energy economy. So go ahead, Steve.
All right, thanks, Kate. So the presentation tonight will be a combination of the what Project 2025 spells out very clearly in their document that they want to eliminate in the way they want to change the way our government works. But I'm also going to highlight a lot of the really great programs that both the Obama administration and the Biden administration have put in place, because a lot of the programs that Project 2025 plans to eliminate, a lot of people haven't heard of before, but they're really great programs, and I'm going to emphasize those along the way as well. So let me pull up my, I'm going to share my screen and pull up my presentation. Oh, I got to go back to the beginning. I was already working on it here. So go back to the beginning, scroll. All right. And here's our, all right. Okay, so as I'm sure you're aware, Project 2025 is this just massive document, 900 pages, covering all a lot of different topics, from immigration to healthcare to abortion, the media. But I focused on, I didn't read the whole thing. I'll admit to that right away. I focused on the areas that would impact climate. So the topics I'm going to cover, and I kind of gave you a preview on what I'm going to talk about here. How it's going to restructure the EPA and other regulatory functions. How it's going to dismantle NOAA. It's going to eliminate a whole bunch of clean energy programs. And that's where I'm going to talk about a lot of the programs that are in place. Open public lands for drilling and exploration for oil companies and coal and gas. And then also one slide I've got on sustainable agriculture that they want to eliminate. So I'm going to start with the EPA. That's the one most people have heard about the most. And this is kind of a really busy slide. Now, what I've done in this presentation, all the black and white text, the Times New Roman, I used my snip tool and took it straight out of Project 2025. So you can see exactly what they have written and the way they wrote it. And it's pretty, pretty stark in some cases. And can you see the top line, Kate? Yes? Okay. My menu is covering it. So, but the day one executive order, and I can't read it, but basically to restructure the EPA on day one. And the overarching message here, and this one, they didn't come right out as clearly as in some of the other things you're going to see in eliminating all these positions. But what they said a number of times that they're going to, downsize all of the departments that have civil servants, the career, nonpartisan scientists and engineers who spent their careers working on all the technical side of pollution control, environmental protection, whether it's air pollution, water pollution, nitrates, all of those experts on all of those topics. They're going to reduce that number by a lot and replace them with political appointees. Interesting aside, I was watching a couple of interviews with Kevin Roberts, who's the head of the Heritage Foundation, which is the organization that put all this together. They had a lot of help from other outside sources, but the Heritage Foundation is kind of the quarterback for this whole thing. And this Kevin Roberts, in this interview, and it was with I think it was the Union of Concerned Scientists, and he was claiming that all these regulatory agencies have become too politicized. They're just so politicized, we've got to do something about that. So we're going to fire all the nonpartisan civil servants and replace them with political appointees. That's what he said. So it's just, it's a projection at its highest level. But so if you look at this, the text from the document, looking at opportunities to downsize this, and you see this second box here, and this is actually one of the more troubling statements they make. The EPA should not conduct any ongoing or planned activity for which there is not clear and current congressional authorization, which means politicians are going to decide what the EPA should be working on instead of the experts who understand the pollution, where it's coming from, and the harms that it'll do. That to me is just, that's really a stark statement there. In this third box I've highlighted here, the majority of the political appointee team must be assembled, vetted, and ready to deploy before day one. So they're already doing this. They're already finding their people to bow down and to the Republican administration to take on these roles. Just on the side, so the blue text you'll see throughout this is either my words or I took it directly from the US government website to explain some of the programs and so forth. But in a nutshell, they're going to replace the civil servants with political appointees and only work on projects with political approval. So the EPA is one of many, many different agencies that are housed under the executive branch. And I'm only talking about the EPA, but they're going to do this to all of those, including the Department of Energy, Department of Commerce, Department of Transportation. They want to downsize and, terminate many of the career civil servants who've been working on these, quite technical in many cases programs, and replace them with political appointees. The next slide is just kind of re-emphasizes what is on this one. They just restated the top box there. And again, the black and white is directly out of Project 2025. Day one priorities: notify Congress that EPA will not conduct any ongoing or planned science activity for which there is not clear and current congressional authorization. I mean, that should make everybody shudder a little bit, in that we're asking, the politicians to decide what science should be done. As a scientist, I take great umbrage with that, I'm afraid. And then they're talking about who's going to oversee these. They want to appoint and empower a science advisor to oversee these projects. And the qualifications for these positions should emphasize management, oversight, and execution skills, as opposed to science. So they just come straight out and say, we're going to take all of the activities that are being done by the scientists and make sure that they're approved by the political appointees and the and get congressional approval. So so that's what they're doing with the EPA. Yeah, I pretty much just restated that here in my own words to just to emphasize that. So again, you're going to see overarching here that the anything to do with pollution or climate or clean energy is going to be eliminated or reduced significantly. That's going to be an overarching theme in this during this presentation. You're going to see that. All right, page down. Here's one of the programs under the EPA that they want to eliminate. It's called the AIM Act, American Innovation and Manufacturing Act. And again, the top part, that's straight out of Project 2025. You see that first bullet point: repeal the Biden administration implementing regulations for the AIM Act. Now, I'm sure most of you know hydrofluorocarbons are the refrigerants, the gases that are in refrigerators, air conditioners, and dehumidifiers. And they are an extremely potent greenhouse gas, 10,000 times more potent than carbon dioxide. When the Montreal Protocol was signed in the 80s to move from CFCs to HFCs, that was for the ozone layer. Both of those, CFCs and HFCs, were extremely potent greenhouse gases. They solved the ozone layer issue in moving to HFCs, but it's still a very potent greenhouse gas. They in 2017, 200 countries signed the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol. The United States did not sign that for obvious reasons in 2017, to eliminate and reduce the HFCs that we've gone to. Then in 2021, Biden brought all those countries back together and strengthened the Kigali Amendment this, with the American Innovation and Manufacturing Act. So the effort here to really reduce these HFCs is ongoing, and it should be a high priority. If you've read the book Drawdown, which was published in 2017, they put HFCs at the very top priority for things to eliminate to stave off the worst effects of climate change, because they're so potent, and actually conversed directly with their executive director, Jonathan Foley, about that, because it's only 2% of our current emissions, but it's the potential to be huge because the global south is improving their standard of living, and they're going to be installing millions upon millions of air conditioning units. And if we can get ahead of this thing and have substitutes for the HFCs before all those new air conditioners get installed, that'd be great. And that's exactly what the Biden administration was planning to do here. And that's what Project 2025 wants to repeal. So that's my hydrofluorocarbon rant. But it's a good one because it's really important that we address that. Now I'm going to talk about NOAA. And just, I'll give you a second, just read that and just, I can't believe they actually put this in print. But this is what they want to do. NOAA should be dismantled and many of its functions eliminated. This coming off the heels of those two major hurricanes in Florida that, the Hurricane Helene, brought such damage, especially to Western North Carolina. And then 2 weeks later, Hurricane Milton, I think it was, right, hit the Gulf Coast of Florida. And thanks to the National Hurricane Center and the fact, the wake-up call that Helene gave us, the evacuation of that Florida coast was almost complete. And I think only a half a dozen people were killed during that. And most of it was on the far east side of Florida, away from where the hurricane hit. So, obviously a very, very necessary resource, and they just want to dismantle it and eliminate those functions. The US government, its top priority has always been keep its people safe. That's should always be our number one priority. And that's what the National Hurricane Center does. And Project 2025 is, well, you can look up in the sky and figure it out yourself, I guess. That's, so there's a number of different agencies housed within NOAA. The Oceanic and Atmospheric Research Agency does the long-range weather and climate forecasting, which is going to be really important as we figure out, how much are the seas going to rise, how bad are our droughts and flooding going to be. That's important work that's being done. The National Ocean Service is really more about coastlines and community coastal communities. Again, looking at sea level rise and resiliency against hurricanes. And then there's also fisheries and then the satellite data. So, yeah, this is a big one that got some publicity as well, that they want to dismantle NOAA and then they want to privatize it. That's another thing that we see through. I went page up here. You'll see throughout there. They want to take these federal programs and privatize them or put them under state control. So they want to decentralize it or let people try to make money off of it by privatizing the, letting companies like Underground Weather and some of those other weather services try to make money off of it rather than having the research done by the federal government. All right, so that's NOAA. Now I think we're going to start talking about the energy side of things and infrastructure. So as you all know, I'm sure, the Biden administration passed these two massive spending bills, the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act, which have brought really, really great programs to places in need. And the Project 2025 says they're going to repeal all the money that's not already spent, rescinding all funds. You can see the bottom line here, rescinding all funds not already spent by these programs. And what I did is I just highlighted some of the things that have been done already with these two acts. So for the IRA, in just 2023 alone, in just last year, not counting what happened this year, which I think is ramping up even more, but last year, 3.4 million Americans benefit from $8.4 billion in Inflation Reduction tax credits to reduce cost of clean energy and energy efficiency upgrades in their homes. And I think an even bigger one is the second one, where the US companies have announced $265 billion in clean energy investments. That's only a fraction of that came from federal tax dollars. The rest is all private spending. So maybe 50 billion was from the IRA, and the other 210 billion is from companies that are using the incentives to kickstart their programs. And the investments are creating 330,000 new jobs. And that's one of the things Biden has always said was, when I think about clean energy, I think about jobs. And it's absolutely working in that direction. Now, the Infrastructure Act, most of that's going towards highways and bridges and so forth. But a big part of that is going towards clean energy transmission. We're going to be talking about transmission a lot today. But so 65 billion is going towards the grid to improve our electric grid. 7.5 billion in EV infrastructure, so charging stations, and then 5 billion for electrifying school and transit buses across the country. And the Biden administration created this grid deployment authority, or grid deployment office, I think it's actually called. We'll see more on that here in a minute, to build a resilient, clean 21st century electric grid. I'll talk more about the grid when we get there. But again, they want to take two of Biden's biggest victories during his 4-year term and just eliminate it. Eliminate all funding from that. All the good it's doing, all the great things that are happening with those two spending bills, and they just want to stop it. All right. And here's where basically anything that has to do with clean energy, they want to eliminate it. And that's, you can see in the box here, eliminate all Department of Energy applied energy programs. And when they say applied energy, they're talking about wind, solar, battery storage, transmission. That's what they're talking about with applied energy. I think under the Obama administration, they established the Office of Electricity, and then the EERE. We'll talk about that more here in a minute. But they want to eliminate the OE, the Office of Electricity, that's been working on getting the grid up to speed and so forth. So grid modernization is really a key component of transitioning to a clean energy economy. The first step is to clean up our electric system, go from centralized coal and gas power stations to these distributed energy resources, where we'll have solar panels, from utility scale solar panels in a huge solar field, to the community solar, to rooftop solar, all feeding into the grid in all different directions, and having these wind farms. And then we're also going to need to store some of that because of the intermittency of wind and solar. And that's all part of, the grid was built to take electricity from a central point and send it out to all the different users. Whereas the new way we're going to do electricity, people with solar panels on their home are selling electricity back to the grid. So it's going in two directions. And the grid wasn't really built for that. So we need grid modernization. We need a smart grid. Also, they say the wind doesn't blow all the time and the sun doesn't shine all the time. Well, the wind is usually blowing somewhere. And so if we have, we're generating more electricity than we need in Iowa, and we need it in the Twin Cities, we need to be able to get it up here, or to Chicago, or to Kansas City, or wherever. And grid modernization is very important for that. And that's why those programs were put in place by both the Obama and Biden administrations. And it couldn't be more stark with the wording here. Eliminate all Department of Energy applied energy programs. And what's implied there is focus only on oil, gas, and coal extraction. And you'll see that in the Department of Interior land use thing. All right, let's page down. So the FECM, now this one's a little bit more controversial, Fossil Energy and Carbon Management Office. And this basically has to do with carbon capture. So and to call it FECM is kind of a misnomer because it's also, I think the biggest source of carbon capture that we're doing right now is in the ethanol plants, especially here in the Midwest. We have, when we're converting our corn acreage, our valuable corn acreage into ethanol for gasoline, the distilling plants that create the ethanol release vast amounts of carbon dioxide, and we have a lot of carbon capture on those. So they're, and I'm sure some of you have read about the carbon dioxide pipelines that they're trying to build through over to North Dakota. We could just eliminate all of that by not using corn for gasoline. That would be better. But in the meantime, the Biden administration is spending money on this carbon management, and they want to eliminate all of that because they just, why are we capturing that carbon dioxide? It's just taking up space. Just put it up in the atmosphere where it belongs. So I put two headlines here from a news release. First, the Department of Energy invested $518 million to strengthen our infrastructure for permanent safe storage of carbon pollution. That's the carbon capture part we're talking about off of both coal plants and ethanol plants. The second one is actually more controversial. The DOE is investing $58 million for removing carbon from the atmosphere. Now, there's a couple of pilot scale, what they call direct air capture, DAC, equipment. One's in Iceland, there's one in California, and there's one in Texas. And what they're finding out so far, and I know we're in early stages here, but the one in Iceland has been up for about 4 or 5 years now, that the energy it takes to run these things is really high, and it doesn't remove much carbon. The one that's been running in Iceland, I saw something on that. It's been running for 5 years, and it's captured about enough carbon dioxide that's equivalent for about 2 seconds of our global carbon emissions after running for 5 years. So yeah, it's at this point, this technology is nowhere near being commercially viable at scale. However, I will say that I've read a lot of decarbonization pathways to 2050 and 2060. And in order to get down to zero net carbon emissions by 2050 or 2060, they all include some type of direct air capture in that model to kind of to support, tree planting is a much better way to get carbon out of the atmosphere. But as we can see from the forest fires, it's not permanent, right? The carbon from these Canadian and California wildfires is going right back up into the atmosphere. So it's really, actually, that's a better way to do it, but we do have the risk of it burning and going back up the atmosphere. So they are looking at this mechanical or chemical removal of carbon from the atmosphere. And Project 2025 just doesn't want us to do any of that. All right. More on energy. Here's the EERE, the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Office. So again, here's stark language right at the top. End the focus on climate change and green subsidies, period. Just stop it. Stop talking about climate change. Stop incentivizing people to reduce their carbon emissions. So the EERE is a department that was put in place by the Biden administration for decarbonizing all of our economic sectors. And I mean, it's an overarching office that's looking at all the different technologies for decarbonizing. You know, the electricity sector, you can see in the bullets below. You know, of course, going to wind and solar, trying to help our nuclear plants along, lengthen their lifespans. Then decarbonizing transportation across all modes of transportation, decarbonizing the industrial sector, steel, cement, ammonia. Those are the big carbon emitters in industry. Well, one of the biggest carbon emitters in industry is the petrochemical industry. The petroleum, you know, that we can decarbonize that industrial structure by just eliminating it. Which is you know, when you look at it, 10% of the carbon emissions from the industrial sector come from the petroleum, natural gas, and coal sector. So we can reduce that slice of the pie just by moving over to wind and solar. Reducing carbon emissions from buildings, and then decarbonizing the agriculture sector, especially between energy and water, which is kind of interesting, a way to look at it. So again, a very good program that's been put in place by the Biden administration, and they just want to eliminate it. All right, how are we doing on time here? 7:33, okay. Again, end grid planning, right there, end grid planning. Why do we need to plan these grids? FERC, the FERC is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. That's the commission that we're talking about down here. But basically they're saying, why do we need a federal agency to plan the grid? Each state should be able to do it themselves. And that's kind of how Texas does it. And we've seen how that's worked out for them. So instead of having a central authority or a regional authority, as is currently done, we're on the MISO, the Mid-Continent Interconnected Service Operation. And our grid goes all the way down to like Louisiana. So we're sharing electrons with all those other states, so that when you know, Iowa and Kansas are producing a lot on a windy day, they can move them around. And why would we need to plan anything beyond our state's borders? I mean, that's what Project 2025 is saying. So as I mentioned, a lot of that grid investment happened through the Infrastructure Act, and then also the Inflation Reduction Act as well. So you can see that first bullet point. They want to transfer all decision-making on electric transmission to the states and reverse the progress that Obama and Biden made towards efficient regional grids and smart grids, and making sure that everybody gets their electricity. And we don't have, you know, some states sitting there with so much electrical capacity that they can't even use it all. Then commission, so FERC, the commission that they're talking about is FERC here, establish rules to bolster investment in the nation's infrastructure, promote reliability and lower costs for consumers. And then the Energy Policy Act of 2005 under George W. Bush actually directed the commission to develop incentive-based treatments for transmission of electric energy in interstate commerce. So the president, who was from Texas, actually got everybody but Texas to cooperate in the Energy Policy Act of 2005. So again, I mean, the language at the top here, end grid planning. Why would we need to plan something like this? You know, they call our electrical grid the world's most complicated machine. I've heard that a couple of times, and you don't need to plan it. It just takes care of itself. You know, again, leave it up to the states and let the market decide is kind of the overarching theme to a lot of these. And rather than having federal oversight and having everybody cooperate and get the thing done in an efficient manner. Here I took a graphic right out of the Grid Deployment Office, which is it was an office that was created under the Infrastructure Act for grid modernization. And so again, Project 2025 is asking just defund the GDO, the Grid Deployment Office. They've already have $9 billion worth of funding to improve the electric transmission across states. They've got 463 projects selected, and it encompasses, I bet you can guess which state's not included in this 49 here, but 49 states, 5 territories, and 178 tribes. So one state's missing out on all this because they wanted to keep the grid within the borders of their own state, and they've been having a heck of a time trying to keep that up and running. So again, basically, Project 2025 wants all the states to be like Texas and take care of their own electrical needs and make their own decisions on how to regulate it. I'll just make an aside here. The fact what happened in Texas in 2021 with the big ice storm they had there, that right away the governor Greg Abbott, right? He said, "Oh, the windmills froze, and that's what caused the problem." Well, that wasn't the post-mortem on that whole power outage. That I think a bunch of people died from freezing in that thing, was that the gas-fired electric plants were the biggest problem. They had how did they phrase that? They had the lowest percentage of expected capacity of all the different, whether it was wind, solar, or the gas and coal. Gas had the lowest percentage of expected capacity during that storm, and it's the biggest slice of the pie of all their generating. And the reason that those gas plants weren't able to generate electricity is that if you've driven through Texas, you'll notice a lot of the natural gas lines are above ground. As opposed to Minnesota, we bury them all about 10 feet deep, so it stays a nice 50 degrees Fahrenheit year round. Winter, summer, it's always 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And those of you who've taken chemistry know that the ideal gas law, PV equals nRT, has, here I'm doing a chemistry professor thing again, but if the temperature of the gas goes down, the pressure goes down. And what happened when all those above ground gas lines got down to 5 degrees Fahrenheit, there was no pressure to move the gas through the lines. And that's what caused the outages at those gas-fired electrical plants. In the news, they said, oh, the gas lines froze. Well, they didn't freeze. The methane doesn't freeze until like minus 300 degrees Fahrenheit or something like that. It's that the gas got so cold, it lost so much pressure, it couldn't flow anymore. So that's what you get if without any regulatory oversight, and you let the market decide how to do things. We'll do it the cheap way and see what happens. All right, there's my Texas power grid rant as well. So got a couple of my rants out of the way. All right, so next, eliminate the OCED, and that's the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations. And again, anything that has to do with clean energy, they just want to eliminate it. So they want to eliminate all Department of Energy demonstration programs, including the OCED, and they say that federal government shouldn't pick winners, right? Well, we've always done that. That's just kind of how it works, and letting the market decide isn't always the best recourse, especially when the market isn't paying for its externalities. When the market can just say, well, we're going to pollute like crazy, it doesn't cost us anything, and but it's cheaper for us that way, and they're getting away with everybody else paying for their pollution. That's kind of what the Project 2025 is talking about here. But the Clean Energy Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations was established by the Biden administration, and to help scale emerging technologies. Again, this one is technologies that are already developed to some extent, and they want to scale them up, right? They want to bring them kind of like the carbon capture thing, but more like also like small modular nuclear reactors, and those are further along. Fusion wouldn't fit in this. This is not something that you're going to scale yet, right? Nuclear fusion. So the OECD is managing $25 billion in funding to deliver clean energy demonstration projects at scale. And that's the key word here, is that scale, in partnering with the private sector. Accelerating deployment. That's really, I mean, if you left the market decide on its own how to commercialize these technologies, it would take too long. We don't have that kind of time. So this is where the federal government steps in, incentivizes the development and the deployment and the scale up, and helps with that, and accelerates our path to a clean energy economy. All right. Now this ARPA-E, that's the more of the fusion scale technology that they're talking about. So eliminate ARPA-E, and ARPA-E has been around for a long time. I think that's actually the agency that developed fracking back in the 90s, with their horizontal drilling, getting into the shale that was harder to get to. So that agency has been around a long time. And this is more the cutting edge, pie in the sky, blue sky type of research. High potential, high impact energy technologies, too early for private sector investment. And then they have projects that are potential to radically improve the U.S. economic prosperity if we can get some of these technologies. This is also, remember Solyndra back in the Obama days? They had, that was the very unusual solar technology that we invested some $40 million in, and it just tanked, where they always ignore the dozens of other programs that were really, well, Tesla was another one that I don't know if ARPA was involved with that, but the federal government bolstered Tesla back in like 2008, 2009, before they were really selling any cars, to keep their technology going. So those types of investments, you're going to have some clunkers, and it's just how it goes. And to single out one and say, look at all the money we blew on this. Projects at that stage of their development, you're lucky to get 1 in 10 that actually works out. But the one that comes out is often quite a big deal. So that's why the government should be doing some of that, incentivizing and incubating, I guess is the word they use in the venture capital terms, to move along some of those technologies. All right, let's move on. All right, now we're on to the Department of Interior and restoring American energy dominance. And so this is for the Department of Interior under a conservative president, to restore the department's historic role of management. Oh, it's this first line that really gets me. Given the dire adverse national impact of Biden's war on fossil fuels. Everybody knows, right, that the oil and gas production in the United States hit a record last year. More oil and gas was produced than at any time by any country in the history. I don't like the fact that I wish we were trying to scale down our fossil fuels, but this first statement is just so out of line with reality. It just it just kind of gives you an idea of where they're coming from here. So some of the things that the Biden administration did do in trying to recoup some of that is they increased the leasing cost for drilling on public lands from $10,000 to $150,000, and increased the royalties by 33%. So the federal government is getting more money from those. I wish they would, eliminate drilling on public land, but baby steps, right? The act also provides special protection for the endangered species and cultural sites, which is great. Now this one is a little contradictory here. In September of last year, the Biden administration canceled all remaining oil and gas leases in Alaska, including the 13 million acres in the Alaska Natural Petroleum Reserve, not the Alaska Natural Wildlife Reserve. But they canceled all those. But I looked up, I said, I thought the Willow project, which is ConocoPhillips, was still ongoing, and it is still ongoing. So I'm not sure exactly what they meant, because this was a press release straight out of the US government website. It said canceled all remaining oil and gas leases, but the Willow project is still ongoing, which doesn't make me happy, but again, the Biden administration is doing a lot to curb that oil and gas expansion. And that's really, and you're going to see that here in a minute, what Project 2025 wants to do. All right. I wish my ruler would go up here. Go back. All right. Okay, so this is Arctic Energy Office, AE. And so they want to, this is probably another office you weren't familiar with, is the Arctic Energy Office. And they want to broaden the Arctic energy operations to encompass basically oil and gas, and expand that, contrary to what the Biden administration is doing with this. And in that statement, here's the vision statement of the Arctic Energy Office: essential source of science, technology, and engineering, ensuring the energy transition. And again, they're talking about the transition to clean energy, delivers benefits to underserved communities, and making science-based decision making, and ensuring national security in the Arctic. And they emphasize that this should be, it will align with the president's goals to establish a carbon pollution-free power sector by 2035, net zero carbon emissions by 2050, and equity as well. Disadvantaged communities will get 40% of the overall benefits from the clean energy investment. So, obviously two very different visions for what to do in the Arctic between the Biden administration and Project 2025. All right. I think it's this next one that has the stark, yeah. So again, the black and white text is straight out of the Project 2025. They're saying that the new administration must immediately roll back Biden's orders and reinstate the Trump era energy dominance agenda. And you can see in the box what they want to do: conduct offshore oil and natural gas lease sales to the maximum extent permitted under the lease program. And they want to stop reviewing the coal leasing program, so that you remove the regulatory barriers and leave it with the governors of Wyoming and Montana, and to get the coal leasing program underway again. So again, maximizing oil and natural gas and coal are their top priorities. Ooh, I got to get going here. I just included this one because they want to rescind the Biden administration act about limiting and keeping the boundary waters area in northern Minnesota pristine. So I put that, this is the Department of Interior. So they want to eliminate barriers to oil and gas production on federal lands and maximize offshore drilling, eliminate federal control of public lands, and allow the states to manage. All right. And this is the last slide. It has to do with agriculture. And denounce efforts to place ancillary issues like climate change. Climate change is an ancillary issue, by the way, ahead of food productivity. Remove the U.S. from any association with the United Nations and other efforts to push sustainable development schemes connected to food production. So again, let the farmers do whatever they want, get out as many greenhouse gases as they want, and stop worrying about trying to do sustainable agriculture. And in the US, agriculture and food production account for about 25% of the US greenhouse gas emissions. Mostly, about half of that's from beef, by the way. If you're wondering where that's all coming from, it's cattle, burps, and their waste, the methane from all that, and then all the cropland that's used. Over half of the U.S. cropland, it goes towards feeding animals instead of feeding people, and about half of the water coming out of the Colorado River is going to irrigate fields for feeding cows, sorghum and soybeans and so forth. But we don't want to do any of that according to Project 2025. Yeah, so Biden and Harris administration made $7.7 billion available for climate smart practices on agricultural lands. And this conservation assistance has helped 28,500 farmers and ranchers conserve 361 million acres of land during the past 2 years alone. So that's amazing. So that's the agriculture slide. And then for the conclusion, just the broad brush strokes here: replace the nonpartisan experts with political appointees in all executive branch departments, eliminate all climate and clean energy programs. Well, not all of them, but the majority of them, and then maximize oil and gas extraction on public lands and coastlines. All right. That's what I have, and we are at 6 minutes. So let's take a look at what we have in the chat here. We're going to stop sharing, bring everybody back. And so Kate says, you've outlined what Project 25 wants to do. How much of this plans needs congressional approval? So can administration just point blank eliminate offices and programs? So that's a great question. Now, what I understand is all the executive office regulatory things, that does not need congressional approval. So replacing all the people in the EPA and Department of Energy and Commerce and Transportation, that can all be done without congressional approval. That's at the president's behest, since those are all executive branch things. And that includes a lot of the programs in all the energy programs are in the DOE as well. A lot of the spending things will need congressional approval, because a lot of the funding went through congressional approval, so they will need congressional approval to eliminate some of those as well. So I don't know 100%, but in one of the interviews I saw with Kevin Roberts, the head of the Heritage Foundation, he said there's a lot in there, and there's a lot in there. And he said no president is going to be able to do all of that all at once, or even in 4 years' time. But we're going to try to get as much through as possible. And basically, that's why they wanted to preemptively vet all of these political appointees and get them ready to step in as soon as possible. But I mean, I'm just scratching the surface on what was in Project 2025. There's so much more on immigration and abortion and healthcare and the media, and there's a lot else that I didn't read through. But yeah, some of the language that you saw today, and again, all that text is taken directly out of Project 2025, and they make no bones about it. They're going to eliminate all these programs. Basically, anything that has to do with climate and clean energy, they want to eliminate. All right.
Does anybody else have any questions for Steve? You can unmute yourself if you'd like. All right. Well, hearing none, thank you, Steve, for this Halloween jump scare. And thanks to all of you for joining us. I guess the bottom line is to get out and vote, talk to your friends and family, get them to vote. It's very important. So I encourage you to watch our website and our Facebook page for announcements about our November event. And we hope to see all of you again soon.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Steve.
All right.